5.3, worksheet 3. If you notice, this is a little different because we have parentheses with our square. But again, you're always trying to get your square by itself. So if you look at example 1, is the square by itself? Yes, because this whole parenthesis is the square. Do you see that? See how this parenthesis is squared? So that's our square. So what will I do in order to get rid of the square? Take the square root of both sides. Okay, what happens when I personally take the square root of both sides? No. Plus or minus. Thank you, Brianna. Okay, so we have x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals plus or minus, and what's the square root of 64? 8. Who thinks they know what I'm going to do at this point? Two Chang.
You're going to subtract 8 to the other side.
Close.
No, bring 4x and minus 4 to the other side.
No. No. Thank you. Was that you, Chris? Okay. 2 equations, because we have a positive 8 equation and a negative 8 equation. So we're going to write this out. We have x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 8. And x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals negative 8. Now, if you notice, on other problems, when we're just getting the square by itself, there isn't a plain x term. Whenever you have an x squared term and a plain x term, you want it set equal to 0 so that you can do what?
Factor.
Factor, exactly. Because when you have this x term right here, you can't get the square by itself because you're going to have this x and it's not going to work out right. So we have to factor. Okay, so what am I going to do over here? No, we want it set equal to 0, so I'm going to... Okay, x squared plus 4x and negative 4 and negative 8 makes
12.
Very good. So when we're factoring, what multiplies to be negative 12 and adds to be positive 4? Very good. X plus 6 and x minus 2 equals 0. And when you set each of those factors equal to 0, what does x equal? Okay, so now we need to do the same thing with the negative 8. So what will I do? Very good. Add 8 to both sides. X squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. And now we're going to factor what multiplies to be 4 and adds to be 4. Good. X plus 2 and x plus 2. Good. And when we set those equal to 0, what does x actually equal? Good. And I don't have to write both of the negative 2's because they mean the same thing. So that means my answer is x equals negative 2, 2, and 6. Yes, Courtney, do you have a question?
Well, I guess I'm kind of skipping ahead to number 3.
Okay.
But because it's x squared plus 7 squared, could we just do like z squared?
No.
Isn't it negative 6? Yeah.
Yes. Good job. Candies, yes. Okay. Yes, you both can have it. That's fine. All right. Whoever feels like they really deserve it because they caught it. Okay, now you guys are just lying. Okay. All right. Any other questions on number 1?
I feel like you should break their mind.
Shh. Number 3. These are actual problems from your worksheet. Okay. Now we're doing number 3. Okay. The square here is by itself because it's saying the whole parenthesis is squared. So just on the last one, the same as the last one, what am I going to do to both sides? What am I going to do? Square root both sides. Okay. Anytime I take the square root, my answer is going to be what? Plus or minus 5 is correct. At this point, what will I do? 2 equations. X squared plus 7 equals 5. And x squared plus 7 equals negative 5. Does this one have a plain x term in it? No. So this one we are not setting equal to 0. We are just getting the square by itself. The only time when you have to have it set equal to 0 is when you have an x squared and a plain x term. Okay? Which is a trinomial. Okay, so what am I going to do? Subtract 7. Good. So I have x squared equals -2. Now what? Very good. Take the square root of both sides. And again, what happens when I square root both sides? Plus or minus. What do I do with that negative? Good, it comes out. So I have I root 2. And can that be simplified any further? How many answers are here right now? No? 2. Because it's I root 2 and negative I root 2. Plus or minus means there's 2 answers. There's the positive answer and the negative answer. Okay, what am I doing on the other side? Same thing, we're going to subtract 7. -5 and -7, though, makes what? -12.
And that makes x equals plus or minus 5 to root 3.
Okay, so we take the square root of both sides. X equals, anytime I take the square root, it's going to be plus or minus. Shh. We take out the negative, which becomes I root 12. Can 12 break down? Okay, 4 and 3, and then 4 is, so pair 2s with the 3 left over. So this answer is
2i.
So how many total answers do I have on this problem? Very good. So we can write that as x equals plus or minus I root 2 and plus or minus 2i root 3.
When we're answering this question and we do x equals plus or minus I root 2 and we do our comma, do we have to do plus or minus again?
You mean for this one? Do you have to write plus or minus in front of it? Yeah. Because they're 2 separate answers.
Okay.
So if you didn't write in front of this, you would think it's only the positive. But it's both the positive and the negative. Okay. Last one. This one's a little bit more complex. The first thing I want you to notice is this square root, is it over the x? It's only over the 2. So pay attention to what's happening. Okay. This one's a little bit more complicated. What's the first thing I'm going to do? Okay, square root both sides. So I have the square root of 2x plus 1 equals what?
3.
Plus or minus 3.
Thank you. Good job. Plus or minus 3 is correct. Now what?
Get the square root.
Nope. 2 equations. So I have root 2x plus 1 equals 3. And root 2x plus 1 equals -3. All right. So now we're trying to get the x by itself, correct? What's the first thing I'll do? Very good. Subtract 1. Root 2x equals 2. How do I get the x by itself? What do I do? How do I get the x by itself? Divide by root 2 to both sides. Okay, can that be my answer? No, why not?
Because you can't have a root on the bottom.
Very good. So what do I do?
Multiply by root 2.
Multiply by root 2 to both the top and the bottom. And root 2 and root 2 makes 2. So I have x equals 2 root 2 on the top and then 2 on the bottom. And I can reduce. Very good. Thank you, Michael. Those 2's cancel, and so x equals what? Root 2.
That's what we started with.
Not exactly. Okay. Other side. Why don't you guys try the other side on your own? When you get the answer, raise your hand and I will come and check it. Okay, it looks like most of you got it. So, you just forgot that -3 and -1 make -4. So, my first thing is I subtract 1 to both sides. Root 2x equals -4 because I added and it stays negative. I divide by root 2 to both sides, but I can't have a root in the denominator. So I multiply by root 2 to the top and the bottom. This makes a pair of 2's. So I have x equals -4 root 2 over 2. And lastly, we can reduce. So I have x equals -2 root 2. So here are my two answers.
Okay, can you give me a second?
Okay, if you notice on this one, on all the other problems, we had an x squared. If you look back, so like in this part, we had an x squared, which gave us these plus and minuses. And this one didn't have an x squared, it just had an x. So this one has two answers where my other one had 4 because I had to do plus and minus 2 times. Yes? Okay. All right, does anybody have questions on this lesson before we move on? All right.